Down this dark alley, inside this car, lies a massacre. A man, alone, is slumped over and dangling out the side of his car door. He has been seemingly stripped of his clothing, wearing nothing but his underwear and a shattered bottle of alcohol right beside him. To the witnesses that just found him, they don't even realize this man is a very popular and revered entertainer, but right now he's just gone. Clearly, he is deceased, and it seems no one has seen or knows what happened. The authorities arrived, and they've come to the fast conclusion that this crime is actually self-inflicted. But those who know the man personally will come to think very differently. This man was down on his luck at this time, and many would say that he had every reason to find himself like this, but also too many things in this crime scene don't add up, and they will try to find out what happened. But what really happened? One of the most classic movies for Black folks is the 1998 TV miniseries, The Temptations. This movie was entertaining on so many levels. It was dramatic, the musical performances were entertaining, and the film at times was kind of funny.
They come in to see The Temptations.
Ain't nobody coming to see you, Otis.
But one of the sadder moments in this movie is the downfall of original Temptations member Paul Williams. We saw how the music industry brought him to ruin. We saw how Paul, who at one point would only drink milk because he refused to drink alcohol, ended up becoming a profuse alcoholic. His addiction had gotten so bad that it ruined his promising career. We saw how alcohol completely destroyed his life and took everything away from him. So in the end, he took his own life. Or so that's what we were to believe. The movie depicted this very story that had been told about Paul Williams for decades. But is it true? It seems there's some conspiracies out there that will make you second guess what you were told about the mysterious death of Paul Williams. Paul Williams was more than just a voice. He was the soul of the Temptations. Born on July 2nd, 1939 to parents, Rufus and Sophia in Birmingham, Alabama, his journey to stardom was marked by determination, raw talent, and the enduring complexities of fame. But behind the polished harmonies and dazzling performances lay a man fighting inner demons and a tragic death that remains clouded in mystery to this day. Paul's remarkable musical talent can be traced back to the influence of his grandfather, a respected gospel singer with a deep love for music and faith. His grandfather was not only a performer but also a patriarch who firmly believed in passing down the family's musical legacy. He raised his sons to embrace their gift for singing, forming a gospel group called the Williams Brothers. Under their father's guidance, the group became a well-known act in their Birmingham, Alabama community, performing at church services, revivals, and local events. The elder Williams, proud of his family's musical lineage, took great care to ensure that this legacy would continue through the next generation. When his son Rufus Williams, also a talented gospel singer, was about to welcome his third child into the world, a boy, the grandfather made a special request that Rufus name his son after him, so that when this child got older, Rufus could teach him to sing the notes. And so Rufus obliged his father, and the baby was named Paul Williams, a name that came with the expectation to carry on the family's musical tradition. Young Paul grew up in the Inslee neighborhood of Birmingham, Alabama. Watching his father, Rufus Williams, as a gospel singer and a member of the Inslee Jubilee Singers, a local gospel group, Paul developed his passion for music. This exposure to harmonies, stage presence, and the emotional power of gospel singing left a profound impression on the young boy. He then became enveloped in his own gospel group, and they became well known in their local town for their brilliant voices and performances as well. It was also during his childhood that Paul first crossed paths with Eddie Kendricks, a meeting sparked by an unexpected fistfight after Paul dumped a bucket of mop water on Eddie's head. Reportedly, Eddie beat him down. Despite their rocky start, the two quickly bonded over their shared love of music, often singing together in their church choir, and they became best friends. In 1957, as teenagers, Williams and Kendricks teamed up with Kel Osborne and Willie Waller to form a secular singing group called the Cavaliers. Kel and Willie, who was a grade above Paul and Eddie, graduated from high school, and decided that they really wanted to put their all into this musical endeavor. So that left the only option of dropping out of the 11th grade for Paul and Eddie, so they did. Of course, their parents were highly upset by this, but the boys quickly showed they were men when they went out and got jobs to support themselves while going after their musical dreams. The group ended up moving to Cleveland, Ohio, where they performed at as many talent shows and auditioned as much as they could, working as dishwashers on the side. They even maintained signing a record deal with a local record label, but that fell through, leaving their recorded songs unreleased. When it looked like their opportunities were looking scarce, they were making preparations to go back to Inslee, when a local newspaper showcased them in an article calling them the Dishwasher Trio. A local pimp by the name of Milton Jenkins saw them and decided to take them under his wing and become their manager. He used his own resources to buy them flashier clothes and have them looking the part as stars. It was also Milton's suggestion to rename their group as now the Primes and to move to Detroit, Michigan. Detroit was the right place at the right time. He saw that the city was a burgeoning hub for black music, home to an array of clubs, radio stations, and Motown records, which was quickly becoming a powerhouse in the music industry. He knew that's where they needed to be to get in the door. They did as instructed and moved to Detroit, where they tried to find their way as the Primes. They gained local acclaim as a performing group by performing everywhere that would allow them. Paul gained the reputation as a charismatic, sexy dancing showman, and Eddie, a Hollywood good boy with a beautiful high voice. Their influence even extended to launching a female counterpart group, the Primettes, who would later go on to become the legendary group, the Supremes. Even still, with all their hard work, the Primes were going nowhere fast. In 1961, the Primes dissolved when Kel Osborne relocated to California. Eddie Kendricks returned to Alabama, but Paul decided to stay in Detroit and keep trying with his passion. He was offered a record deal as a solo artist, but he only felt comfortable being in a group. That's all he'd ever known since he was a child, and he also loved the brotherhood of it. Paul quickly called Eddie and told him to come back to Detroit. Eddie did, and during this visit, the two discovered that Otis Williams, leader of a competing Detroit group called The Distance, was looking to fill 2 spots in his lineup. Seizing the opportunity, Paul and Eddie joined forces with Otis Williams, Melvin Franklin, and Elbridge Bryant to form a new group, now being called the Elgins. But after everyone made fun of their new name, Paul is the one that suggested that they needed to be sexy, desirable, and tempting. They needed to be called the Temptations. Later on that year, the group auditioned for and signed with Detroit's rising music label, Motown, setting the stage for their historic journey in music. Even though the group was signed to one of the biggest labels out, they were not successful at all. As Paul was originally the lead singer, they released a slew of flops. Pop songs like Paradise and I Wanna Love I Can Feel were all duds and got them nowhere. It got so bad that they were nicknamed the Hitless Temptations. It didn't help that many of them had families to now take care of. Paul, who by now was married and about to have his 4th child, wasn't making any success with this music thing. It was getting beyond frustrating. One of the group members, Elbridge Al Bryant, became so frustrated with the group's lack of progress that he developed a horrible drinking habit and became extremely volatile. The breaking point came during a rehearsal for a New Year's Eve Motown performance when Al, already frustrated, grew irate and lashed out at Paul Williams, striking him in the face with an alcohol bottle. The shocking act of violence stunned the group and left Paul injured and even hospitalized. Yet despite the assault, Paul showed incredible compassion. When the other members wanted to fire Al immediately, Paul intervened, defending him and pleading for another chance. Paul's loyalty and belief in second chances were emblematic of his character, even in the face of such a personal attack. However, Al's behavior continued to deteriorate in the months that followed. His drinking and erratic temperament made it increasingly difficult for the group to maintain their focus and professionalism. The tension reached a point where it was clear that Al's presence was helping to hold the group back. Despite Paul's earlier efforts to save him, the decision was ultimately made to let Al go. In 1963, Al Bryant was officially fired from the Temptations. His departure marked a turning point for the group, paving the way for the addition of David Ruffin, whose voice and charisma would help propel them to stardom. David Ruffin's addition wasn't the only magic that helped rocket the group. Brilliant songwriter and hitmaker Smokey Robinson came through, and in 1964 gave them their first hit, The Way You Do the Things You Do, which climbed into the Billboard Top 20. Their success quickly followed, with chart-topping classics like My Girl, Ain't Too Proud to Beg, and I Know I'm Losing You, solidifying their place in music history. However, by 1965, Paul's role in the group began to fade as David Ruffin and Eddie Kendricks became the group's primary lead vocalists on their most successful singles. Feeling sidelined, Paul reportedly expressed his frustration, exclaiming, "Shit, I can sing too!" This led to him being granted the lead on Don't Look Back. In 1965, a soulful showcase that became one of his signature performances. And beyond his vocal talents, Paul was regarded as the group's best dancer and served as their original choreographer. He created many of their iconic stage routines, including the Supremes' famous Stop in the Name of Love hand gesture, but once again his role would be sidelined as Motown's legendary choreographer, Charlie Atkins, took over for the label's acts, leaving Paul feeling useless. As the Temptations climbed to unimaginable heights, Paul Williams faced numerous personal and physical challenges throughout his life, many of which took a toll on his health and career. Suffering from sickle cell anemia, he frequently battled debilitating pain and exhaustion, a condition worsened by the physical demands of performing. On top of that, Paul got involved in some slimy behavior that caused more stress in his life. In 1965, Paul began an affair with Winnie Brown, a hairstylist for the Supremes and a relative of Supremes member Florence Ballard. Paul, who was a country boy at heart, fell deeply in love with Winnie, who put him onto the city life. She was cute, charismatic, and a go-getter, and that really turned Paul on. But even with his illicit affair with Winnie, Paul was also still a church boy, at heart too, and he felt much guilt cheating on his wife, Mary Agnes, and children. But he didn't feel guilty enough to stop. Around the same time, his health started to deteriorate even more. Life on the road made his difficulties worse, leading Paul to drink more than he'd ever done in his life. This was a stark contrast to his earlier days when he reportedly drank nothing stronger than milk and his friends noticed. Fellow group member Otis Williams later reflected, "To see a guy come from drinking milk to drinking, sometimes 2 to 3/5 of Courvoisier a day, that was kind of hard to take." In the spring of 1969, Paul and Winnie opened the Celebrity House West, a boutique in downtown Detroit, catering to celebrities. However, this venture failed completely, leaving Paul stuck with over $80,000 in debt, the equivalent to nearly $665,000 today. As financial pressures mounted, his health continued to decline. Exhaustion and pain often left him unable to perform. Him turning to alcohol to self-medicate obviously wasn't helping, and his problems were affecting the group. The other members of the Temptations tried to support Paul by staging interventions, confiscating his alcohol, and even keeping oxygen tanks backstage to help him during performances. Despite their efforts, his condition and performance quality continued to decline. Refusing to seek medical attention, Paul became increasingly isolated, his struggles casting a shadow over his once brilliant career. On top of his health challenges, alcoholism, not feeling valued as a Temptation member, Paul became more careless with his life and even started talking to Otis about having self-deletion thoughts. He started missing rehearsals and performances, and when he did show up, he could barely perform due to his respiratory illness. He couldn't dance anymore, and his once powerful voice began to falter, making it increasingly difficult for him to perform. In an effort to maintain their high-performance standards, the Temptations brought in Richard Street, the lead singer of fellow Motown group, The Monitors, and a former member of The Distance. Richard was tasked with traveling with the group and singing Paul's parts during live performances. However, for Paul's signature songs, such as Don't Look Back and For Once in My Life, Richard would sing from backstage, hidden behind a curtain, while Paul performed in front of the audience. When Paul was unable to take the stage due to his health, Richard would step in as his on-stage replacement. Despite these efforts, by April 1971, Paul was persuaded to see a doctor, and he finally agreed. A medical examination revealed a spot on his liver, and he was advised to step away from performing entirely to focus on his health. Paul was made to make the difficult decision to retire from the Temptations, officially leaving the group. Richard Street then became his permanent replacement. To support Paul during this challenging time, the group ensured he continued to receive his 1/5 share of royalties and kept him on the payroll as an advisor and choreographer. For the next 2 years, Williams remained connected to the group, contributing to their choreography even as he battled his declining health. But all was not well. Paul knew he couldn't survive off that meager wage that Motown was giving him. Feeling like all he could do was music, he had expressed his desire to go solo, hoping to establish himself outside the Temptations. However, it is alleged that Motown was not going to let that happen, and they refused to release him from his contract so that he couldn't record for anyone else. Some accounts say that Motown made vague promises to support a solo project for Paul if he sobered up. This is all Paul needed to hear to give him hope. Paul then made attempts at sobriety. He started to actually take care of himself and his health and stayed away from the bottle long enough to get clean. He started writing songs with his best friend Eddie, and he even, out of his own money, recorded songs and paid for his own studio time. He was ready. All he wanted was a chance. On top of this and his new sobriety, Paul also tried to mend his family back together. He tried to get back with his wife Mary, but to no avail. And even though they were separated and in the process of a divorce, they still somehow managed to be friends. With that door being closed, Motown screwed him over and decided not to release any of the material he recorded, nor did they try to help him with his career at all. Feeling trapped and unable to pursue his personal ambitions, Paul decided to take Motown to court for unpaid royalties. But seeing how bad his own finances were, more than likely this legal dispute was not going to end well for him. Motown was a juggernaut and had all the resources and lawyers to take him down. Paul reportedly sank deeper into depression. He was in extreme amounts of debt, still stuck as a prisoner to Motown, who refused to let him go. He lost his family, and he found out that his girlfriend Winnie was cheating on him. His life had completely fallen apart. All of this distress and feelings of hopelessness sent him back to the bottle, and as the story has been told, to a gun. On the evening of August 17, 1973, one of the most unsettling and mysterious deaths in Hollywood history occurred. Paul's body was discovered in an alley on Detroit's west side, slumped over inside his car, a few blocks away from Motown's Hitsville building. He had suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the left side of his head, and a weapon, a .32 caliber revolver, was found nearby. Paul was also partially dressed, with his shirt open and wearing only floral swim trunks, which has led some to suggest that he was in a hurry or caught off guard. A bottle of alcohol was also reportedly discovered, shattered near him in the car. At first, there didn't seem to be any signs of foul play, and because there didn't seem to be any witnesses, the police, for whatever reasons, decided to quickly rule this a self-deletion. But certain details at the scene have raised suspicions and fueled conspiracy theories for decades. One of the most perplexing aspects of the scene was that 2 shots had been fired from the gun, yet only 1 bullet struck Paul. The second bullet was found lodged in the car, suggesting that a shot had been fired before the fatal one. This anomaly has led many to question the official narrative. Why would there be an additional shot if it were truly a self-deletion? Some theorists speculate that the first shot might have been a misfire, or that there was a struggle before the fatal shot was fired. Moreover, the trajectory of the gunshot raised eyebrows as well. Some claim the angle of the wound seemed inconsistent. His wound was on his left temple, but the gun was found on his right side. Paul would have had to hold the gun across his head in a very unnatural manner to pull that off. Another detail often scrutinized is the absence of fingerprints on the gun. If Paul had shot himself, one would expect his fingerprints to be present on the weapon, but no such evidence was reported in official findings. Then, there was the shattered bottle of alcohol next to Paul, which suggests that he may have been holding the bottle at the time he was unexpectedly shot and dropped it. Then the fact that he was barely dressed in only his underwear suggested to many people that he was in a hurry to get away from someone. But who could that someone have been? While there are many theories as to what happened, here's what's believed to have actually happened that day, and some suggestions on what could have happened. Early that Friday morning, Paul reportedly spoke to his wife, Mary Agnes, by phone. According to her, he sounded unusually upbeat and happy, which stood in stark contrast to his struggles with depression and health issues, as well as his paranoia. For a couple of weeks now, he'd been saying how he felt someone or something had been stalking him. But Mary stated that even though she and Paul were separated at the time, their conversation seemed to suggest he was in good spirits and even hopeful for his future. Also, family and friends reportedly said that, even though he was having financial difficulties, Paul had just bought a brand new house and had plans on celebrating the achievement with them soon. Later that day, Paul visited his girlfriend, whose name has not been publicly confirmed. The visit, however, was reportedly tense. Some accounts claim they argued because she was planning to host a party, which Paul opposed. It's said he left her house after the argument, but returned later, further clouding the timeline of events. After leaving his girlfriend's house, what transpired remains unclear, but several theories attempt to explain his untimely death. This is the main one. It was told that Paul was at his girlfriend's house and that her estranged husband unexpectedly came home and caught them in the act. The situation became violent and sent Paul running, with her husband in pursuit. That Paul made it to his vehicle and tried to get away, but not before the husband caught him. Inside the car, there may have been a struggle between the two. Paul could have picked up the alcohol bottle to defend himself. A misfire of the first shot lodged into the car door, then the second one became the fatal shot. The husband could have wiped his fingerprints off the gun and placed it next to Paul's body to make it look like a self-deletion. As to why, with all this conflicting evidence, the police just continued to, even to this day, rule his death a self-unaliving. Nothing about the evidence provided shows that that would be the case. But despite these lingering questions, the case was never reopened, and the mystery of what truly happened to Paul Williams remains unresolved. What makes it worse is that there are actually more theories as to what happened and who could be behind his death. Number 1, the mob theory. One theory suggests that Paul was targeted by individuals tied to organized crime. Paul had been struggling with finances, including substantial debts and an IRS lien of over $80,000. Some speculate he may have borrowed money from the wrong people or been involved in a deal that turned sour. According to this theory, his death was orchestrated to send a message or settle a debt. Number 2, the Motown hitman theory. Some conspiracy theorists suggest that Paul's death was connected to Motown itself. By this time, Paul had grown increasingly dissatisfied with the label, feeling trapped in his contract and frustrated by unfulfilled promises of a solo career. Supposedly, he'd threatened to reveal dark secrets he knew about the bigwigs of Motown, as well as keep up the legal disputes he was in with them. This theory suggests that powerful figures in Motown may have hired hitmen to have him silenced to prevent him from taking further legal action or exposing the secrets about the label. Number 3, the robbery gone wrong theory. Another plausible explanation that has gone around is that Paul was the victim of a robbery gone wrong. The area where he was found was known to be unsafe, and it's possible he was targeted for his car or other possessions. However, the fact that no items of significant value, such as his car or wallet, were reported stolen has cast doubt on this theory. Still, despite the official ruling of self-deletion, inconsistencies at the scene and the strange details of his final hours have left many questioning whether Paul Williams truly took his own life or if something more sinister occurred. Each theory has its own set of supporters. but no definitive evidence has ever emerged to clarify the events of that tragic day. Paul Williams' death remains a mystery, leaving fans and loved ones to wonder what truly happened during his final hours. Paul's funeral took place on August 24, 1973, with family, friends, and former bandmates attending to pay their respects. He was survived by his wife, Mary Agnes Williams, and their 5 children. In addition to his immediate family, Paul also had 3 other children from 3 different girlfriends. All the members of the Temptations were Paul's pallbearers, and they put their friend to rest. Many of them also didn't believe that Paul took himself out. Members from the group had their doubts. Eddie Kendricks expressed doubts that Paul would take his own life. He said how Paul had been sober for months and was making plans for the future, including pursuing a solo career. To them, the official story didn't add up, but whatever actually happened, what was a fact, Paul was gone. Today, Paul Williams' name remains synonymous with the golden era of Motown. His contributions to the Temptations helped define a sound that shaped the course of music history. In life, Paul Williams brought joy to millions, yet in death, he left behind an unresolved mystery. So, lurkers, what do you think? Do you believe the official account surrounding Paul's death? Do you think it was foul play? What do you think really happened? Let me know down below.